August dawn, 1976. The Nebraska Sandhills stretched to the horizon, silent under a sky the color of gunmetal before sunrise. Among a herd of grazing Hereford cattle, 85 white shapes move in formation, walking like they were trained for this. Walking like they have always belonged here. 12 miles north, a roadside cafe burns yellow at the corner of Main and Highway 83. Cigarette smoke, the smell of coffee scorched against the bottom of the pot. 15 brown felt cowboy hats gathered around a Formica counter. A man's voice rises through the laughter. $560. For birds, the laughter detonates like a shotgun in the dark. In the farthest corner, 3 booths back, a woman sits alone. The coffee cup in her hand went cold 10 minutes ago. She does not turn around. She does not speak. She only listens, both hands resting flat on the table, shaking. August 1976. Valentine Cafe sat on the corner where Main Street kissed Highway 83 like it had been doing since before anyone in Cherry County could remember. Formica counter. Chipped enamel mugs. Coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during the Eisenhower administration, and never quite forgiven the world for what came after. Tuesday morning, 5:30. The counter filled with men in brown felt cowboy hats. 15, maybe 20. Hard to count because they all looked the same after a while. Same weathered faces. Same squinted eyes from staring into Sandhills' sun for 40 years. Same way of holding a coffee mug like it might try to escape. Donald Fisher was telling the story again. 4th time this week. Which meant by Valentine standards it was officially true. I'm telling you what I saw with my own eyes. Donald Fisher. 55 years old, president of the Cherry County Cattlemen's Association. 8 consecutive terms. Not because he was beloved, because he was the only man willing to show up to every meeting for 8 years straight, and nobody else wanted the job badly enough to make him stop. Sunday morning. I'm driving back from the Niobrara Valley Field Day, coming down that stretch past the old Morrison place. You know the one. South Meadow where the 2 lakes sit. Everyone knew the one, and I see them. Pause for effect. Donald Fisher loved pauses. 80 geese. Maybe 90, hard to count because they were moving. Walking around with the Herefords like they belonged there. Like someone's had written them into the natural order of things, and forgot to tell the rest of us. Laughter rippled down the counter. Not cruel laughter, not yet. Just the low chuckle of men who had seen strange things before and survived them by not taking them too seriously. The Morrison widow. This from Jeb Wilson. 63. Ran cattle on the section north of town. Lost his wife to cancer in 74. Understood widows better than most, which didn't mean he understood this. Donald nodded. Linda Morrison. Owen's wife. Well, Owen's widow now. 3 years this November. What in God's name is she doing with geese? That's what I asked myself. So I stopped the truck, got out, walked to the fence, counted them proper. 85 by my tally. Toulouse mostly. Few Emden ganders mixed in. Walking in this loose formation around the calving cows like they were on patrol. More laughter. Patrol for what? Grasshoppers? Beats me. But I'll tell you what. I drove straight to the association office. Pulled the county records. Linda Morrison bought that breeding stock from McMurray Hatchery in Iowa back in May. Paid cash. $560. Someone whistle low. $560 for birds. That's what I said. What's she gonna do? Milk them? The laughter got louder. Donald Fisher leaned back on his stool, crossed his arms. Let the moment settle. I'm saying this as association president. Cattle ranchers run cattle. Small farms run birds. You mix them? You run neither. That's not opinion. That's 40 years of professional consensus from every stockman between here and Chadron. No one disagreed. Because disagreeing with Donald Fisher at the Valentine Cafe on a Tuesday morning required energy most men didn't have before 6 a.m., and because he wasn't wrong. Not by any standard anyone in that room recognized. Geese didn't belong on cattle operations. Everyone knew that except apparently Linda Morrison, who sat 3 booths back, corner table, alone, coffee cup in front of her going cold. Because she'd been holding it, without drinking for the last 10 minutes, listening. Linda Morrison, 38 years old, widow, owner of 640 acres of Sandhills pasture that had been in her husband's family since 1892, and in her hands since November 1973, when Robert Morrison died in a roping accident at a neighboring ranch and left her everything except answers about what to do with it. She didn't turn around, didn't interrupt, didn't stand up and announce that Donald Fisher had counted wrong, that it wasn't 85 geese. It was exactly 80 Toulouse goslings, plus 5 Emden ganders, because she'd ordered them specific, imprinted them specific, released them to pasture specific, according to a system her mother had perfected over 24 years, a system every man at that counter would have called foolish if they'd known about it, which they hadn't. Until now. Linda set down 50 cents, 2 quarters, exact change. No tip, not because she was cheap, because tipping felt like asking permission to leave and she didn't need permission from anyone. She stood, walked to the door, boots on linoleum, steady, even. The walk of a woman who'd been walking away from rooms full of men her entire life, outside the cafe. Parking lot, the Ford F-250 sat at the far end, 1968 model, faded blue, rust eating the wheel wells, not hers, borrowed. From Kenneth Hayes, her farmhand, the only person who'd stayed after Robert died, the only person who hadn't suggested selling. Linda opened the driver's door, closed it, didn't start the engine, just sat there, hands on the steering wheel. 10 and 2, like she was driving. Except the truck wasn't moving, wasn't going anywhere. Her hands were shaking. Not from cold. August in Nebraska didn't get cold. From something else, fear maybe. Or the specific kind of exhaustion that comes from being right about something nobody else believes yet. Because Linda Morrison wasn't gambling on geese. She was gambling on her mother's voice. And Margaret Morrison had never been wrong about land. 1932. Margaret Morrison was 24 years old when she started the flock. Not because her mother had done it. Not because her grandmother had done it. Not because some county extension agent told her it was a good idea. Because she'd read about it. In journals. University of Nebraska research publications that came in the mail twice a year, wrapped in brown paper and addressed to Harold Morrison, her husband, who never opened them, who stacked them in the barn next to the tack room and forgot about them, until Margaret found them one winter, when she was looking for burlap sacks to line the chicken coop. She'd opened one, then another, then all of them. Spent 3 months reading by lamplight after Harold went to bed. Taking notes in a composition book she'd bought at the O'Neill hardware store for 15 cents. Sketching diagrams, copying charts, learning words like symbiotic and pastoral integration and complementary grazing systems. European models mostly, French, German, Dutch farmers who'd figured out centuries ago what Nebraska ranchers were still refusing to consider, that geese and cattle weren't competitors, they were partners. Geese ate the broadleaf weeds cattle wouldn't touch, thistle, bindweed, dandelion, Russian knapweed, all the plants that crept into overgrazed pasture and choked out the native bunch grass until a section that should have supported 30 head could barely handle 15. Geese alarmed at predators. Coyotes, foxes, skunks, great horned owls, anything that moved wrong in the dark. A flock of Toulouse geese could raise enough noise to wake a dead man and send every predator in 5 miles looking for quieter hunting. Geese picked ticks off calves, groomed them, walked flank formation during calving season, provided mobile shelter, reduced fly strike, and geese produced income down, twice a year, plucked clean, sold to pillow manufacturers in Sioux City for rates that made Harold Morrison sit up and pay attention when Margaret showed him the numbers. Eggs, year-round. Sold to markets in Valentine, breeding stock. Goslings sold to hobby farmers in spring, 3 revenue streams from 1 flock. Margaret presented her findings to the Cherry County Cattlemen's Association in March of 1934 spring meeting. She'd prepared notes, typed them on Harold's old Underwood, brought charts, hand-drawn, pasture rotation schedules, stocking density calculations, predator corridor maps. She stood at the front of the Valentine VFW hall and spoke for 12 minutes. The association chairman, Donald Fisher's grandfather, a man named William Fisher, who'd run cattle in Cherry County since before statehood, who believed in 3 things: God, beef, and the unshakable certainty that women belonged in kitchens, not cattlemen's meetings. He interrupted her at minute 13. Mrs. Morrison, voice like gravel in a cement mixer. This is meeting for ranchers, not for farm wives with backyard hobbies. I'm sure your geese are very nice, but we've got serious business to discuss. I'm going to ask you to sit down now. Margaret didn't sit down. She stood there, 5 seconds, 10 looking at William Fisher, then at the 40 men behind him, waiting for someone to disagree. No one did. Margaret folded her notes, put them in her purse, walked out of the VFW hall, got in Harold's truck, drove home, never went back. But she didn't stop. She bought 54 Toulouse goslings from a hatchery in Iowa, raised them, imprinted them, released them to pasture, ran them with Harold's Hereford herd for 24 consecutive years, kept records every year. In a leather memorandum book she'd bought at that same O'Neill hardware store, cost $1.75. Brown cowhide, brass clasp, pages lined in faint blue, perfect for pencil. She documented everything: dates, weights, hatching schedules, plucking cycles, income, expenses, pasture conditions, calf weights, predator encounters. The numbers didn't lie. 1934. The year of the Great Drought. The year half the ranches in Cherry County went under. The year banks foreclosed on operations that had been running since before the Civil War. Harold Morrison's ranch survived, not because of cattle, because of geese. Margaret sold $640 worth of goose down that year to a pillow manufacturer in Sioux City, a Norwegian immigrant named Olaf Tollefsen, who'd started his company in 1947. After returning from a cattle drive through the Sandhills and telling his wife that the only soft thing on the northern plains was a goose, and someday the rest of the country would figure it out. $640, more than the cattle brought in, enough to pay the bank, keep the land, survive until the rain came back. Margaret ran the geese until 1956, 24 years. Zell calves lost to predators. Thistle infestation cleared by 1939. Average weaning weights up 23 pounds, soil organic carbon measured. Though Margaret didn't know what to call it then. She just knew the grass grew thicker, greener, held water better after rain. Then the arthritis came, rheumatoid, early onset, aggressive, started in her hands, knuckles swelling, joints stiffening. Mornings when she couldn't grip a coffee cup, couldn't hold a feed bucket, couldn't open the gate latch without using both hands and all her weight. She was 48 years old, too young to quit, too old to pretend it wasn't happening. Spring of 1956. Margaret called her daughter into the kitchen. Linda, 18 years old, high school graduate, planning to go to Lincoln for secretarial school in the fall, because that's what daughters of Sandhills ranchers did if they didn't get married first. Margaret handed her the leather book. Linda, I need you to listen. Linda took the book, opened it, saw her mother's handwriting, page after page. 24 years of notes. Men are going to tell you this is foolish. They'll say geese don't belong on cattle ranches. They'll say it until they see it fail for themselves. But it won't fail. The geese aren't the gamble. Quitting is. Linda looked at her mother's hands, swollen, twisted, barely functional. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying I have to sell the flock. I can't manage them anymore, but I'm not selling the knowledge. That's yours. Keep this book. Read it, learn it. And when you're ready, when you have land of your own, bring them back. Margaret sold the flock to a neighbor 2 weeks later. 54 working geese, gone. 1958. Margaret Morrison died. Stroke, 50 years old. Linda was 20. Working as a secretary at the Farmshire office in Valentine. Living in a rented room above the hardware store. Attending the funeral of a mother who'd been right about everything except how to make men listen. The leather book went into Linda's suitcase, stayed there, unopened, until 1973. Robert Morrison proposed to Linda in the summer of 1960. They were standing in the parking lot of the Valentine livestock auction. Linda had just gotten off work at the Farm Bureau. Robert had just sold a load of yearling steers, good prices. He was feeling optimistic. Linda, I've got 640 acres, a house, barn, good water. I'd like you to see it. She'd seen it. Everyone in Cherry County knew the Morrison place. I've seen it. I'd like you to see it as my wife. Not romantic, not poetic, but honest, which mattered more. They married in October. Small ceremony, Methodist church, reception in the fellowship hall, cake, punch, handshakes. Robert was 28, Linda was 22. He was a good man, hard worker, honest, loyal, the kind of husband who fixed fence on Saturdays and took Linda to church on Sundays and never once raised his voice, even when the cattle market crashed, or the tractor broke down, or the well ran dry. But Robert Morrison didn't believe in geese. Linda mentioned it once, fall of 1961. They'd been married 1 year. The ranch was breaking even, barely. Beef prices were down. Input costs were up. The math wasn't working. Linda showed Robert her mother's leather book. explained the system, showed him the numbers. Robert listened, then shook his head. "Linda, I love you, but I'm not putting birds on my cattle pasture. That's not how things work here. My father didn't run geese. His father didn't run geese. I'm not starting now." Linda didn't argue. She closed the book, put it back on the kitchen shelf, waited. 1962. Rebecca was born, Linda's daughter, Robert's daughter. A baby girl with her mother's blue eyes and her father's stubborn chin and a future that included everything except geese. Linda didn't mind. She had time. Rebecca would grow up. Robert would come around. Or he wouldn't. Either way, the book was still on the shelf. The knowledge was still there. Waiting. 11 years passed. November 1973. Robert Morrison died. Roping accident. He'd gone to help a neighbor with fall branding. Brought his own horse. His own rope. His own confidence that he'd done this 1,000 times and would do it 1,000 more. The calf broke wrong. The rope tangled. Robert's horse spooked. Robert went down hard. Didn't get up. Died before the ambulance arrived. 36 years old. Linda was 35. Rebecca was 11. The ranch was theirs. All 640 acres. The house. The barn. The debt. The cattle. The endless gray expanse of Sandhills grass that rolled from horizon to horizon like frozen ocean waves. And the leather book, still on the shelf. Winter of 1973. Linda sat at the kitchen table after Rebecca went to bed. 10 o'clock. Outside, the temperature had dropped to 15 below. Wind rattling the windows. Snow piling against the barn. The kind of night that made a person understand why settlers went crazy out here. Why women walked into blizzards and never came back. Why the Sandhills broke people who weren't built for breaking. Ranch books spread in front of her. Income. Expenses. Debt payments. Projections, the numbers were bad. Losing $2,400 a year. Beef prices down, feed costs up, fuel costs up, everything up except revenue. Linda had 3 options. Sell to George Patterson, her neighbor. 60 years old. Owned 4,000 acres on the south section. Had been making quiet offers since Robert's funeral. Nothing pushy. Just casual mentions. Over coffee, after church. At the auction yard, Linda, "If you ever think about selling or leasing, I'd be interested. Fair price, no pressure, translation. I'm waiting for you to fail, and when you do, I'll be right here. Doppen 2. Lease the pasture, keep the house. Let someone else run cattle. Collect rent, survive on that." Survive being the key word, not live. Survive. Doppen 3, another way. Linda opened the leather book, first time since Robert's funeral. First time in 12 years. Margaret's handwriting. Pencil on lined paper. 1934 entries. June 12. Plucked 18 geese. Yield 6.2 pounds clean down. Sold to Tollefson Manufacturing. 32 LLB. Total $198.40. Jolly 8. Sold 60 eggs to Valentine Market. $85 dozen. Total $425. September 3. Sold 12 breeding goslings. $10 each. Total $120. Linda did the math. Adjusted for $1974. Roughly $3,500 to $4,000 annual income from geese. On top of cattle revenue. Enough to balance the books. Enough to keep the ranch. Enough to prove her mother right. But there was always a but. Everyone in Cherry County would laugh. Everyone who'd laughed at Margaret would laugh at Linda. Donald Fisher. George Patterson. Every man at the Valentine Cafe. Every woman at church. Every neighbor who drove past and saw geese walking with Herefords and thought, "There goes the Morrison widow." Lost her mind along with her husband. Could Linda handle that? Could Rebecca? An 11-year-old girl whose father just died. Whose mother was about to become the county joke. Whose classmates would hear about it. Whose teachers would whisper. Whose entire adolescence would be colored by the fact that her mom was the crazy widow with the geese. Linda closed the book, went to bed, decided nothing. Spring of 1974. Rebecca turned 12. Linda turned 36. The ranch lost another $2,400. Linda opened the book again. This time she didn't close it. She read every page, every entry. 24 years of her mother's life, compressed into pencil marks on lined paper. And Linda understood something she hadn't understood at 18. Her mother hadn't been trying to prove men wrong. She'd been trying to keep the land. That was all. Everything else. The mockery, the dismissal, the being shut out of cattlemen's meetings. That was just noise. The land was what mattered. Margaret had saved the land, and Linda was about to lose it, unless she did what her mother did. Brought the geese back. Ran them the way Margaret ran them, proved the system worked. Again Linda made the decision. March of 1974. She didn't tell anyone, not Rebecca, not Kenneth Hayes, not George Patterson. She just started preparing. Winter of 1975. Linda spent her evenings in the barn, repairing the brooder shed, the building Harold Morrison had built in 1958. Margaret's father, Linda's grandfather. 16 feet long, 10 feet wide, corrugated tin roof, single hand-hung cedar door. Interior partitioned into 3 bays, heat bay, with 300-watt infrared lamps, feed and water bay, with galvanized steel waterers and a wooden trough Harold had hand-cut from a single ash plank in 1957. Imprint bay, where Margaret had sat every morning at 5 and every evening at 7 for 6 consecutive weeks during the Goslings' critical imprint window. Linda rebuilt what needed rebuilding, replaced rotten boards, restrung the lamp wiring, tested the waterers, built new nesting boxes from scrap lumber, worked alone after dark so no one would see, so no one would ask questions. February of 1976. Linda wrote a letter, 3 pages, lined notebook paper, addressed to Murray McMurray Hatchery, Webster City, Iowa. Dear Sir, I am writing to place an order for spring delivery. 80 Toulouse Goslings, 5 Emden Ganders, pickup scheduled for 3rd Tuesday of May, payment cash on delivery. She mailed it. 3 weeks later, the hatchery replied, order confirmed. Pickup May 18, total $560. Linda folded the letter, put it in the leather book, waited. April of 1976. Linda called Rebecca into the kitchen. Rebecca, 14 years old. Freshman at Valentine High School. Quiet kid, good grades, didn't cause trouble, didn't make waves. The kind of daughter teachers loved and classmates ignored. She was doing homework at the table, algebra. Linda sat down across from her. Beck, I need to tell you something. Rebecca looked up, pencil in hand, waiting. Tuesday I'm driving to Iowa, picking up 85 goslings from a hatchery. I'm bringing them back here, to the ranch. I'm going to raise them, imprint them, release them to pasture, run them with the cattle. Rebecca blinked. Like Grandma Margaret? Exactly like Grandma Margaret. Silence. Rebecca set down her pencil. Mom, everyone's going to laugh, I know. At school, at church, everywhere, I know. Why are you doing this? Linda opened the leather book, turned it so Rebecca could, because Grandma Margaret was right, and I can prove it. But it's going to take time, years maybe. And during that time, people are going to say I've lost my mind, that I'm wasting money, that I should sell the ranch to Mr. Patterson and move to town. Rebecca looked at the book, page after page of handwriting. Her grandmother's handwriting, a woman she'd never met, who died 4 years before Rebecca was born, but whose legacy sat on this kitchen table waiting. Beck, I need to know. Can you handle people laughing at us? Because they will. And it's going to be hard, especially for you. You're the one who has to go to school. Face your friends. Hear what they say. Rebecca looked at her mother, really looked, saw something she hadn't seen since before her father died. Purpose, Mom. If you can handle it, I can handle it. Linda felt something in her chest unclench. She hadn't realized how tight it had been. Okay. Rebecca went back to her algebra. Linda went back to planning. May 18th, 1976. Linda drove to Iowa. Kenneth Hayes F-250, blue, rusty. Reliable. Kenneth had loaned it without asking questions. Mrs. Morrison, truck's yours. Long as you need it. 178 miles. Linda left at 5 a.m., arrived at the hatchery by 1 p.m. Murray McMurray Hatchery sat on the southern edge of Webster City. Low brick building, gravel parking lot, hand-painted sign. Been there since 1917. Survived 2 world wars, the Depression. Every farm crisis since. Linda walked in. Man at the counter looked up, 60-something. Bald, wearing overalls and a name tag that said Earl. Help you? I'm here to pick up an order. Morrison, 80 Toulouse Goslings, 5 Emden Ganders. Earl checked his clipboard. Yep, got it. They're ready, week old, healthy. You got cash? Linda handed him $560 counted out in 20s. Earl counted it twice, nodded. Wait here. He disappeared into the back, came back with 12 cardboard boxes, lined with cedar shavings. Soft cheeping sounds coming from inside. Need help loading? No, sir, I got it. Linda carried the boxes to the truck, one at a time, 12 trips, stacked them in the bed, secured them with rope. A man walking past stopped, looked into the truck bed, looked at Linda. Somebody's got themselves an expensive lawn ornament project. He laughed, kept walking. Linda didn't respond. She climbed into the cab, started the engine, drove home. 8 hours, 2 fueled stops. 1 motor oil stop at a Kimco station outside Norfolk. Because the engine was burning oil and she couldn't afford to seize it halfway across Nebraska. 11 p. Melinda pulled into the ranch. Rebecca was waiting at the brooder shed, 14 years old, hoodie, flashlight in hand. Mom. Did you get them? I got them. They unloaded together, mother and daughter. 12 cardboard boxes, carried into the brooder shed, placed in the heat bay. Linda opened the first box. 8 Toulouse goslings, fluffy, yellow-gray, tiny eyes barely open, making soft peeping sounds. Rebecca reached in, picked one up, held it in both hands. Mom, they're so small. Not for long. They worked until midnight, setting up waterers, filling feed troughs, adjusting heat lamps, making sure the temperature held at 95 degrees, making sure every gosling had access to food and water, making sure none were trampled or separated. By the time they finished, Linda's back ached, and Rebecca's eyes were red from exhaustion. But the goslings were safe, warm, fed, imprinted to the sound of Linda's voice, and the sight of Rebecca's face, and the smell of this particular barn on this particular ranch on this particular night, which according to Margaret's notes was the entire point. Imprinting, critical window. First 6 weeks, the geese would follow whoever fed them, whoever talked to them, whoever walked among them during those first 42 days, and when Linda released them to pasture in August, they would follow her, guard her cattle, protect her calves, exactly like Margaret's geese had done. For 24 years, Linda and Rebecca walked back to the house. Didn't say much, too tired, but Rebecca stopped at the door, turned. Mom, you really think this is going to work? Linda looked back at the brooder's shed, light glowing through the window. Soft cheeping audible even from here. Beck. Grandma Margaret did this for 24 years. 0 calf loss. 0 years losing money. Even in the drought of 34 when everyone else went under. She survived because of the geese, but what if people laugh? They will laugh, and you're okay with that? Linda thought about it. No, I'm not okay with it, but I'm more okay with being laughed at than I am with losing this ranch. Your father left us this land. My mother saved this land. I'm not giving it up because Donald Fisher thinks geese don't belong here. Rebecca nodded. They went inside. By the end of August, the goslings had grown. Half-sized geese now. Full pin feathers. Imprinted. Following Linda in a tight waddling line whenever she walked between bays. Following Rebecca when she came to help after school. Learning the sounds of the ranch. Pickup truck engine. Barn door creaking. Cattle lowing in the distance. Learning the rhythms. Morning feeding at 5. Evening feeding at 7. Learning that Linda Morrison was safety and everything else was threat. 3rd Sunday of August, Linda opened the brooder gate. Walked across the dirt yard to the open Sandhills pasture south of the ranch road. 85 geese followed, single file at first, then spreading into loose formation, walking into grass they'd never seen, toward cattle they'd never met, toward a future that depended entirely on whether Margaret Morrison's pencil-marked notes from 1932 were right, or whether every van at the Valentine Cafe was right. Linda stood at the pasture fence, watching the geese disperse, watching them begin to graze, watching them approach the Hereford cows with caution but not fear. And she wondered, this is it. No turning back now. By tomorrow morning George Patterson would drive past. By tomorrow afternoon Donald Fisher would hear. By tomorrow evening the entire county would know. Linda Morrison, the widow, put geese on her cattle ranch, and the laughing would begin. September 1976, church potluck, 3rd Sunday, Methodist Fellowship Hall, arranged in rows, folding chairs, covered dishes, casseroles, salads, desserts. The same food the same women had been bringing to the same potlucks for the same 30 years. Linda Morrison brought green bean casserole. Rebecca Morrison brought nothing. Because 14-year-olds didn't bring food to church potlucks. They just showed up, ate, endured. Linda set her casserole on the serving table, turned to find coffee. Donna Patterson stepped in front of her. Donna, 58, George's wife, pillar of the church, respected, admired, the kind of woman other women listened to because she'd earned the right to be heard. Donna smiled. Warm. Too warm, Linda. Honey, can I talk to you a minute? Linda followed her to the corner, away from the tables, away from ears. Donna's smile faded. Linda, I need to say this as someone who cares. Robert wouldn't have wanted this. Linda felt something cold settle in her mouth. Wouldn't have wanted what? The geese. Your mother. Margaret was a sweet woman, but she had ideas that didn't fit here. And now you're following those ideas, and people are talking, saying you've lost your judgment. For Rebecca's sake, sell those birds. Before you become the county joke. Linda looked at Donna 5 seconds. 10 then. Donna. My mother wasn't sweet. She was brilliant. And she wasn't wrong. I'm not selling the geese. Rebecca knows exactly why. Linda walked away. Back to the serving table. Picked up her casserole. Carried it to the kitchen. Washed her own dish. Rebecca was waiting by the door, Mom. Can we go? Yes, they left. Drove home in silence until Rebecca spoke, Mom. Are we the county joke? Linda kept her eyes on the road. Not yet. But we might be for a while. The question is, can we stand being the joke long enough to prove we're right? Rebecca looked out the window, Sandhills rolling past. Endless, gray-green. How long? Might be years. Rebecca didn't answer. Just watched the landscape, thinking about school tomorrow, about the whispers, about being 14 and having a mother everyone thought was crazy, but also thinking about her grandmother, who'd been right, and her mother, who was following a system that worked, even if nobody else believed it yet. Rebecca turned back. Okay, one word. But it was enough. March 1977. Calving season started. 3rd Tuesday. Linda Morrison walked the South Meadow every morning at 5, every evening at 7, checking cows, looking for signs, ears back, tail up, separation from the herd, restlessness. The geese walked with her, not following, flanking, loose formation, 20 feet out on each side, moving when she moved, stopping when she stopped. Adult. By the end of April, Linda Morrison had lost 0 calves to predators. George Patterson had lost 7-3 on the south boundary, the boundary that ran along Linda's lakes. 4 on the north section. George's son Stephen tracked the coyote prints. Every morning, first light, prints ran from the Patterson fence line into the willow thicket on the northern Morrison boundary, and stopped, didn't cross into Linda's pasture. Stephen reported to his father, Dad. The coyotes stopped at the willows, because the geese taught them to. George didn't believe him. April. But late that month, April 27th, 9 p.m., George drove to the Morrison ranch. Alone, didn't tell Donna, didn't tell Stephen. Just drove, parked outside Linda's gate, engine off, sat there, watching moonlight across the pasture, Geese walking flank formation, 20 feet out from a calving cow, moving when she moved, stopping when she stopped. Adult, protective, exactly like Linda said they'd be. George sat for 20 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, watching proof he didn't want to accept, because accepting it meant admitting Linda Morrison, 38-year-old widow, knew more about ranching than he did. Meant admitting he'd dismissed her mother for 40 years. Meant admitting his entire understanding of how Sandhills ranching work might be wrong. George started the engine, drove home, told nobody, not Donna, not Stephen, not Donald Fisher, and especially not Linda, because saying it out loud would cost him something he wasn't ready to pay. His certainty. George lost 2 more calves on the north section, 3rd week of April. Coyote prints ran along the section roads, didn't go within a mile of the Morrison operation. By the end of May, the geese had been ranging with Linda's herd for 14 months. The cattle had stopped flinching at the gander's hiss by the 3rd week of August 1976. Started walking in loose proximity to the gaggle by the 2nd week of September, by calving in March of 77. The cows were calving with geese standing flank guard at 20-foot radius from the labor mound, and the coyotes weren't coming. They were going around. George Patterson didn't drive to the Morrison ranch to admit this. Not yet. But he knew. And knowing without saying was its own kind of cowardice. January 1978. Linda Morrison sat at the kitchen table. 10 p.m. outside. -15 degrees. Wind howling. Snow against the windows. She'd just come back from Valentine Methodist church meeting. Pastor's wife had pulled her aside. Again, 10th time. Asked the same question. Different words. Same meaning. Linda. Is this goose thing something Robert would have approved of? Linda hadn't answered. Just carried her dish to the kitchen. Washed it. Left. Now she sat at the table, alone. Rebecca asleep upstairs. 16 years old now. Junior at Valentine High. Ranch books spread in front of Linda. 1977 numbers. Profit, $1,200. Not much, but not a loss. First time since Robert died that the ranch had broken even, because of the geese. Zell calf loss. Thistle down 30%. Weaning weights up 18 pounds. The system worked. Margaret had been right. Linda was right. But nobody cared. Nobody saw. They just saw the joke. The widow with the geese. Linda opened the newspaper, Sunday edition. 2 days old, classifieds in the back. She'd circled an ad, farm for sale. 640 acres, Cherry County. Owner motivated. She'd even started a letter to a real estate agent in Valentine. Got 3 sentences in. Dear Mr. Thompson, I am writing to inquire about listing my property for sale. The ranch consists of stopped, couldn't finish, because finishing meant admitting defeat. And Linda Morrison hadn't survived 38 years by admitting defeat. But God, she was tired. Tired of being laughed at. Tired of Rebecca coming home from school quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that meant someone said something. Tired of sitting alone at church. Tired of the whispers. Tired of proving herself to people who didn't want to be proven wrong. Linda heard a sound, bedroom door upstairs. Footsteps on the stairs. Rebecca appeared, 16, pajamas, hair messy from sleep. Mom, why are you still up? Linda covered the newspaper. Quick, too quick, paperwork, baby. Go back to bed. Rebecca walked to the table, looked down, saw the newspaper, saw the circled ad, Mom. Are we selling? The air thickened. Linda couldn't lie. Never could. Not to Rebecca. Beck? I don't know. I'm tired. It's been 2 years. 0 calf loss. Thistle down 30%. Weaning weights up 18 pounds. But nobody cares. Nobody sees it. They just see the joke. And I'm starting to think, maybe they're right. Maybe I am just the widow who can't let go of her mother's crazy ideas. Rebecca sat down, across from her mother, looked at her, really looked. And Linda saw something in her daughter's face. Not fear, not anger. Certainty, Mom. You want to know what I think? What? I think Grandma Margaret was right. I think you're right. And I think in 10 years every person who laughed at us is going to wish they'd listened. But here's the thing. Even if I'm wrong, even if they never admit it, I'd rather be your daughter. The one who tried something hard, than be their daughter. The one who played it safe. Linda felt something crack in her chest. She hadn't cried since Robert's funeral. 4 years. Hadn't let herself, because crying meant weakness. And widows running cattle ranches couldn't afford weakness. But sitting there, at the kitchen table at 10 p.m., on a January night cold enough to freeze thoughts, with her 16-year-old daughter telling her it was okay to be brave, Linda cried. Rebecca stood, walked around the table, hugged her mother, didn't say anything, just held her, until Linda stopped shaking, until Linda wiped her eyes, until Linda stood, took the newspaper, tore out the classified page, crumpled it, threw it in the trash, took the unfinished letter, tore it in half, in the trash. Okay. Rebecca smiled. Mom, we're not selling. No, we're not. Good. Rebecca went back upstairs. Linda sat back down, looked at the ranch books. $1,200 profit. Not enough to get rich, enough to survive, enough to keep going, enough to prove Margaret Morrison right, eventually. The years between 1978 and 1981 were the deep work years. The years nobody saw, because deep work doesn't make good stories. Deep work is just work. Linda Morrison kept her head down, ran the geese. Ran the cattle, documented everything in Margaret's leather book. Calf weights, pasture composition, predator encounters, weather patterns, feed costs, down income, egg income. Every year the numbers improved. 1978, 0 calf loss. Thistle down 35%, 1979. 0 calf loss. Bindweed cleared from South Meadow, 1980. 0 calf loss. Weaning weights up 21 pounds, 1981. 0 calf loss. Weaning weights up 23 pounds, 1981. The Valentine Livestock Auction published its annual newsletter. Fall edition. Donald Fisher edited it. Had for 12 years. The newsletter listed performance data for every ranch in Cherry County. Pounds of weaned calf per cow. Pounds of weaned calf per acre. Pasture composition. Weed pressure. Predator loss. Morrison operation. Number 1. In Cherry County. By every metric that mattered. Donald Fisher couldn't ignore the numbers. Couldn't hide them. The data came from the auction yard records. Public record. Donald published them. Buried them on page 8. But they were there. The men at the Valentine Cafe read the newsletter. Saw the numbers. Didn't stop joking about the geese. Just stopped joking in front of Linda. The mockery moved sideways. Became a different kind of mockery. Less about failure. more about unusualness. Linda's operation was successful, but weird, and weird made people uncomfortable, even when it worked, especially when it worked. Because if weird worked, then normal might be wrong, and nobody wanted normal to be wrong. May 1980. Rebecca Morrison graduated high school. 18 years old, valedictorian, full scholarship to University of Nebraska-Lincoln, animal science program. Linda sat in the bleachers at the Valentine High Gymnasium, watching her daughter walk across the stage, shake hands with Principal Anderson, accept her diploma, turn, smile towards Linda in the crowd. And Linda wondered, Robert should be here, Margaret should be here. But they weren't, so Linda clapped alone, proud, terrified, because Rebecca was leaving, going to Lincoln, 178 miles away. But not until August 1982, Rebecca worked the ranch for 2 years first, learned the cattle, learned the geese, learned the land, until she was ready. August 1982, Linda drove Rebecca to Lincoln. Ford F-250, Kenneth's truck, still borrowing it, still hadn't bought her own, money was better, but not good enough to buy a vehicle outright. They drove in silence most of the way, until Linda pulled up to the dormitory, Sandoz Hall, East Campus. Rebecca's home for the next 4 years. Linda helped carry boxes, up 3 flights of stairs. Rebecca's room was small. 2 beds, 2 desks, 2 dressers, 1 window overlooking a parking lot. Her roommate hadn't arrived yet. Linda set down the last box, turned, looked at her daughter, and didn't know what to say. Rebecca spoke first. Mom, I'm going to study what you and Grandma did, but with a degree. So when I come back, they'll have to listen. Linda's throat tightened. Beck, you don't have to leave to prove anything. I'm not leaving to prove. I'm leaving so I can come back stronger. Mom, you fought this fight alone 6 years. Let me get the credentials. Next time we fight together, and we win. Linda pulled something from her jacket pocket. The leather memorandum book, Margaret's book. Rebecca's eyes widened. Mom, I can't take that. You can. Grandma Margaret left it to me. I'm lending it to you. Learn what's in there. Bring it back. We'll add your chapter. Rebecca took the book, held it like it was made of glass, opened the first page, Margaret's handwriting, June 1932. Purchased 54 Toulouse Goslings. McMurray Hatchery, $48. Imprint begins tomorrow. Rebecca closed the book, hugged her mother. Linda held her, longer than necessary. Because letting go meant driving home alone, to a ranch that would feel too big, too quiet, too empty. Finally, Linda stepped back. I'll see you at Thanksgiving. Sees you at Thanksgiving. Linda walked to the truck, drove home, alone. Spring 1985, Linda Morrison woke up with pain in her hands. Both hands, stiffness in the knuckles, swelling in the joints. She'd noticed it for a few weeks, thought it was weather, cold mornings. January in Nebraska could make anyone's joints ache. But it was May now, and the pain was worse. She went to the kitchen, made coffee. Couldn't grip the pot handle right, had to use both hands. That scared her, more than the pain, because she'd seen this before, in her mother, 1955. Margaret's hands, swollen, twisted, barely functional. Rheumatoid arthritis. Linda drove to Valentine the next day. Dr. Anderson's office, small clinic on Main Street. Dr. Anderson was 70. Been practicing in Cherry County since 1945. Delivered half the babies born in the county, including Linda, including Rebecca. He examined her hands, asked questions, how long, how bad, morning or evening. Both Dr. Anderson sat back. Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to be straight with you. This looks like early-stage rheumatoid arthritis. Same thing your mother had. It's manageable, but you need to reduce physical labor, hire more help, or, given your age and situation, selling might be wise. Linda's stomach dropped. How long do I have before it gets bad? Hard to say. Could be 5 years, could be 15. But it will get worse. Linda drove home, hands shaking on the wheel. Not from the arthritis, from fear. Because her mother had been 48 when the arthritis forced her to quit. Linda was 47, same age, same disease, same deadline. Margaret had to sell the flock at 48. Linda had maybe 5 years, maybe 10. Before her hands stopped working, before she couldn't hold feed buckets, couldn't open gates, couldn't manage the geese, just when she'd proved the system worked. Just when the numbers were undeniable. Her body was giving her the same deadline her mother got. Linda pulled into the ranch, sat in the truck, looked at her hands. They didn't look that bad, yet, but they would. She called Rebecca that night, Lincoln. Rebecca was a junior now. 21 years old, studying range science, working on her thesis about multi-species grazing systems in the northern Great Plains. Using her grandmother's data, using her mother's data, building the academic framework that would prove Margaret Morrison right. In language universities understood. The phone rang 3 times. Rebecca answered, "Mom, Beck. I need to tell you something." Winter 1984, Linda Morrison received a letter, return address. South Dakota State University. Brookings, she didn't know him at South Dakota State. Opened it anyway. "Dear Mrs. Morrison, my name is Dr. Amanda Foster. I am an associate professor of range science at South Dakota State University. My research focuses on multi-species grazing systems in the northern Great Plains. I recently read about your operation in a feed and grain industry newsletter that referenced data from the Valentine livestock auction records. Your results are extraordinary. 0 predator loss, significant improvements in pasture composition and weaning weights. I would like to propose a multi-year research collaboration. Annual visits to measure pasture composition, soil organic carbon, livestock health markers, calf loss data. No individual ranch will be named in any publication without your express written permission. You may withdraw at any time. Would you be willing to discuss this? Sincerely, Dr. Amanda Foster." Linda read the letter twice, set it down, picked it up, read it again. A university researcher, wanted to study her operation, wanted to measure what Linda had been doing for 8 years, wanted to prove, scientifically, what Margaret had proved practically. Linda wrote back 3 weeks later, "Dear Dr. Foster, yes. Don't use my name. Linda Morrison, May 1985. Dr. Amanda the Foster arrived at the Morrison Ranch in a brown AMC Eagle, 1981 model. 2 graduate students in the back seat. Yellow hard hat on the front passenger floorboard. She introduced herself at the gate. Linda shook her hand, noticed immediately that Dr. Foster's handshake was firm, confident. The handshake of someone who'd spent a career making men take her seriously. "Mrs. Morrison, thank you for agreeing to this. I'd like to walk your South Meadow on foot before we do anything else." Linda led her out. May light, long, golden across the bunch grass. The geese were ranging, 3 established subflocks. Among the Hereford cow-calf pairs at the edge of the South Lake, Dr. Foster stood at the rise overlooking the lake, 45 minutes. Didn't say anything, just watched. Watched the gander-led north subflock cross the lake margin. Drive a coyote off a fence line in the middle distance. Watched the dam-led south subflock pick-biting, flies off the faces of 3 calves resting in the shade of a Sandhills willow stand. Watched the 3rd subflock graze the thistle margins of the bare sand patches where the bunch grass had thinned. Finally, Dr. Foster turned, "Mrs. Morrison, I've spent 11 years studying northern plains grazing systems. I've ridden research plots from the Texas Panhandle to the Saskatchewan border. I've never seen anything like this. I'm here for 1 day. May I have 5? She got 5. Dr. Foster returned every May 1985 through 1990, rode the South Meadow on horseback with Linda every spring, 1 12-hour day, measured pasture composition at 64 sample points, recorded calf health metrics, took soil cores at 12 sample points, 1987. Dr. Foster published a paper, Journal of Range Management, title, Multi-Species Grazing with Resident Anseriforms. A case study from the Sandhills. The paper referenced Linda's operation only as Cooperator A findings: 38% reduction in calf loss to predators, 41% reduction in pasture broadleaf weed cover, 23-pound increase in weaning weight, 26% increase in soil organic carbon at 0 to 12-inch depth, all measured against a 5-year rolling baseline of comparable Sandhills cow-calf operations in an 8-county region. The paper became the most cited article in the Journal of Range Management for 1988. None of the Sandhills ranches found Cooperator A yet, but they would. By 1985, the flock had grown from 85 to 240 geese. Linda had been breeding selectively, for size, for territorial aggression. For the imprint cycle Margaret had documented spring of 1982, first breeding stock sale. A small farm in Holt County called heard about the Morrison geese. Wanted to try the system. Linda sold them 25 goslings, $35 each. Included 3 Emden ganders. Included 1 consultation visit. She drove to Holt County in May. Walked their pasture, mapped predator corridors. explained imprint protocol, drove home. By 1983, Linda had added a new revenue stream, the down, twice yearly plucking. She contacted a bedding manufacturer in Sioux Falls, small company, started in 1947 by a Norwegian immigrant. Grandson ran it now. He answered Linda's letter with a hand-typed contract. 500 pounds of cleaned grade A down per year. $32 per pound, the cost to buy whatever else she could produce. The grandson visited once a year in October, inspected the down, stayed for 1 cup of coffee, never asked about the cattle, always paid cash on delivery. Down income 1985, $14,720, egg income, $800, goose meat from culls, $1,200, breeding stock, $6,000, total from geese, $22,720, cattle revenue, $48,000. The geese had become the second best income generator on the ranch, and nobody in Cherry County knew, because Linda didn't talk about it, just kept working. The years accumulated, 1986, 1987. Each year the same, Linda working alone, Rebecca in Lincoln, the geese doing what geese do, the cattle doing what cattle do, the land healing, slowly, imperceptibly, the way land heals when you stop fighting it and start listening. Linda turned 50 in 1988, arthritis worse now. Some mornings she couldn't make a fist, but she could still work, still manage, still prove Margaret right, one day at a time, until the summer of 1988 arrived. And everything changed. Summer 1988 arrived like a fist through glass, June 17th. The rain stopped, not gradually, not the way rain usually tapers off into drizzle and then mist and then memory. It just stopped. One day clouds, next day nothing. Blue sky that stretched from horizon to horizon, without a single shred of white to break it up. First week of July, the temperature in Cherry County hit 103 degrees. By July 15th, it reached 105. Held there, day after day, 19 consecutive days. The native bunch grass that had been holding through the dry June at fair condition began to crash by the third week of July. Pastures that had been overgrazed in the late 70s and early 80s went first, because overgrazing meant shallow roots. And shallow roots meant the grass couldn't reach deep moisture. And without deep moisture, the plants just gave up. Thistle exploded into the bare patches the drought had opened. Bindweed followed. Russian knapweed crept in behind. All the opportunistic weeds that thrived in disturbed soil and laughed at heat. By the first week of August, every Sandhills pasture in Cherry County showed visible weed infestation. Except one, Morrison operation. Linda's South Meadow still looked green. Not lush, nobody's pasture looked lush, but green enough, because the geese had been eating the thistle for 12 years. Had kept the bindweed from establishing. Had prevented the Russian knapweed from ever getting a foothold. So when the drought hit, when the bunch grass thinned, there were no weeds waiting to take over. Just more bunch grass, stressed, but alive. George Patterson drove past the Morrison fence line every Sunday after church. Had been doing it for 12 years now, never stopped. Never went in, just slowed down. Looked, drove on. August 21st, George slowed down. Looked, saw Linda's pasture. Green then looked at his own east section. Visual from the road, brown. 40% of his summer forage gone to weed shift. George kept driving, didn't go home, went to the cafe. Even though it was Sunday, even though the cafe was closed, he just sat in the parking lot. Engine running, air conditioning blasting, thinking about 12 years of driving past Linda Morrison's ranch. 12 years of seeing her geese. 12 years of knowing she was right, and never saying it out loud. The bigger problem wasn't weeds, it was coyotes. Coyote populations in Cherry County had been climbing through the spring and early summer of 1988. The drought compressed the prey base. Jackrabbits died in the dry pastures. Ground squirrels died, prairie dogs died, and the coyotes, hungry, desperate, started pushing into Sandhills, calf in numbers nobody had seen since the 1956 drought. By mid-July, they were taking calves at midday, at salt licks, through fence lines. In pairs, by the end of August 1988, the county-wide calf loss to predation rate was running at 11.4%. 11.4. George Patterson had lost 38 calves on the south section by the morning of August 23rd. Donald Fisher had lost 22 on his east pasture. Jeb Wilson had lost 19 on the section he ran with his son. Carlton Lewis had lost 11, then sold out his entire cow-calf inventory at 30% discount at the Bassett cattle auction just to cover his feed bill for September. And Linda Morrison had lost 0 Zell. Rebecca Morrison came home in June. Summer break, 22 years old now. Animal Science Junior, 3 years at Lincoln. 3 years studying what her grandmother had practiced, what her mother had proved, building the academic language around a system that didn't need academic language because it just worked. But academia needed language, needed peer review, needed citations and methodologies and statistical significance. So Rebecca gave it to them. She'd been working with Dr. Foster, co-authoring papers, presenting at conferences, building a reputation as a serious researcher. Not just Margaret Morrison's granddaughter, not just Linda Morrison's daughter, a scientist in her own right. Rebecca pulled into the ranch driveway the first week of June. Her own car now, 1983 Honda Civic, bought used with money from a research assistantship. Linda was standing at the barn when Rebecca arrived. 50 years old now, hair more gray than brown, hands showing the arthritis, slight stiffness in how she moved, but still working, still managing the geese, still running cattle, still proving Margaret right. Every single day, Rebecca got out of the car, hugged her mother, felt how thin Linda had gotten, not sickly thin. Work thin, the kind of thin that comes from 12 years of carrying weight nobody else could see. Mom, you look tired. I am tired, but we've got work to do. Drought's bad, going to get worse. I need your help documenting what happens when it does. Rebecca nodded, pulled a notebook from her car, spiral bound, university logo on the cover. I'm ready. The Cherry County Cattlemen's Association called an emergency meeting, August 23rd, evening, VFW Hall in Valentine. 61 ranchers attended. The meeting opened with a presentation by the County Extension Range Specialist, Emergency Haying Options, moved to a presentation on federal disaster declaration paperwork. Then the coyote question came up. Donald Fisher was at the front of the room, 63 years old now, still association president, 15th consecutive term, because nobody else wanted the job badly enough to take it from him. A man in the back row stood. Donald. What about the Morrison operation? Donald stiffened. The Morrison operation is Mrs. Morrison's responsibility. I won't be making official association comment on operations conducted without cattleman consultation. The room held still. Then Kenneth Hayes stood up, third row, 60 years old. Worked for Linda Morrison since 1973, 15 years. Stayed quiet those 15 years. Listened to the jokes, heard the mockery, never said anything. Until now. Donald. I've stood in that south meadow 12 years. Watched those geese walk out of the brooder in single file. Watched them flank the calves at calving. Watched a Toulouse gander chase a coyote off a fence line at 3 a.m. in the rain. Kenneth's voice didn't shake, didn't waver. Steady, clear. 15 years of silence compressed into one moment. I'm going to tell every man in this room something I should have said in 1976. The geese aren't freak luck. The geese aren't a hobby. The geese are exactly what Margaret Morrison wrote in a leather memorandum book in 1932. Exactly what she ran on her ranch for 24 years. Exactly what every Sandhills rancher's grandmother knew before we forgot. He paused. Let that land. The geese are why Linda Morrison is sitting at 0 calf loss. And the rest of us are sitting at 11.4%. The geese are our blind spot. We laughed at them for 12 years. We're going to apologize for the laughing for the rest of our lives. Kenneth sat down. Nobody spoke. Donald Fisher didn't respond. Couldn't. Because responding meant admitting Kenneth was right. And admitting Kenneth was right meant admitting Donald had been wrong. For 12 years, the meeting ended 10 minutes early. Morning of August 24th, Stephen Patterson drove to the Morrison Ranch. 7 a.m. Stephen was 35 now, ran the day-to-day operations on his father's ranch. 4,000 acres, good land, good cattle. Losing 38 calves in 7 weeks, he pulled up to Linda's gate. Linda was walking from the brooder shed to the lakeside of the South Meadow. 5-gallon feed bucket in one hand, coiled lariat over her shoulder. She saw Stephen's truck, walked over, set the bucket down, stood at the driver's side window. Stephen, Aunt Linda. You want coffee? No. Stephen took off his hat, set it on the dashboard, looked at her through the open window. Aunt Linda. My father didn't send me. He doesn't know I'm here. He's lost 38 calves in 7 weeks. I've been driving past your South Meadow every Saturday for 12 years. On my way home from the auction yard, watching the geese walk the fence line in the evening like they own the place. I came today because I think they do own the place. I came to ask if you'd sell us goslings. Linda didn't answer right away, just looked at him. Stephen Patterson, George's son, 35 years old. First person to ask, first person to admit, after 12 years, Stephen. Price is $35 per gosling. Minimum order 30. Includes 3 Emden ganders. Includes 1 consultation visit from me, spring 1989, to set up the brooder. Train your hands on imprint protocol. Walk the pasture with you. Identify the holding water and predator approach corridors. Fee covers that visit. No follow-up included. If you want follow-up, rate is $80 an hour. Stephen nodded. Aunt Linda, I'm in. Word traveled in Cherry County the way word always traveled, fast, invisible, unstoppable. By the morning of September 2nd, Linda had received 14 phone calls. By the end of September, 23, all ranchers, all asking the same question. Would she sell them goslings? Most of them had laughed at her in 1976. All of them had heard by the end of August that Stephen Patterson had ordered 30 Toulouse goslings and 3 Emden ganders from the Morrison operation for delivery in May 1989. All of them wanted to know if Linda would do for their operations what she'd done for hers. Linda hadn't anticipated this. She'd planned. On the morning of August 24th, when Stephen Patterson stood at her gate, that she would sell goslings to the Patterson Ranch in 1989, and possibly to 1 or 2 other neighbors in 1990. 23 phone calls changed the math. Evening of October 7th, Linda sat at the kitchen table, leather memorandum book open, pencil in hand, Rebecca across from her. Home for fall break, 3 days. Then back to Lincoln. Linda wrote down what she could do alone, what she could do with Kenneth Hayes, what she could do with 1 part-time hatchery hand, what she could do if she expanded the brooder shed. By the end of the evening she had the math. She could supply goslings to 9 to 12 Sandhills ranchers in spring 1989. $35 per gosling with pasture design. Brooder construction. 1 consultation visit per ranch. Total revenue if all 9 to 12 operations bought, $36,000 to $60,000. She would work 70 hours a week from January through May. She would hire Owen Hayes, Kenneth's son, 22 years old. Full-time at $12 an hour, she would expand the brooder. She would teach the next generation of Sandhills ranchers how to work geese with cattle. Rebecca looked at the numbers, Mom. That's more than the cattle bring in, I know. You're going to be running a hatchery operation, I know. People are going to say you're taking advantage, that you're profiteering from the drought. Linda set down the pencil, looked at her daughter, Beck. Let them say it. I'm charging what it cost to raise. Imprint, deliver, plus consultation. I'm not getting rich. I'm sharing what your grandmother taught me. What I've proved works. If people want to call that profiteering, fine. But I'm not giving away what took me 12 years to prove. Rebecca smiled. Good, but not everyone was happy. September 1988, before the goslings were delivered, before the contracts were signed. Donna Patterson drove to the Morrison Ranch. Alone, 62 years old, George's wife, hadn't spoken to Linda since the church potluck in 1976. 12 years, Donna parked at the gate, walked to the barn. Found Linda working on a section of fence. Linda saw her coming. Set down the pliers, waited. Donna didn't smile. Didn't pretend this was a friendly visit, Linda. I need to speak with you, Donna. My husband is ordering geese from you. My son already ordered. I came to ask you not to sell to them. Linda crossed her arms. Why? Because you're taking advantage. These men are desperate. The drought has them scared. You're capitalizing on fear. What you're doing. It's not Christian. Linda felt something cold and sharp settle behind her ribs. 12 years of mockery she'd handled. 12 years of being dismissed she'd survived. But being accused of profiteering, of exploiting fear, that was different, Donna. I'm charging $35 per gosling. That's what it costs me to raise. Imprint, deliver, plus 1 consultation visit. I'm not getting rich. I'm sharing what my mother taught me. What I've proved works. You spent 12 years telling me I was wrong. Now you're telling me I'm wrong for being right. Tell me, Donna, what would make you happy? Donna didn't answer, turned, walked back to her car, drove away. Linda stood at the barn, shaking, not from anger, from something else. The realization that some people would never forgive her for being right, because being right meant they'd been wrong. And admitting they'd been wrong was harder than staying angry. That evening, Rebecca asked, "Mom, is Mrs. Patterson right? Are we taking advantage?" Linda was sitting at the kitchen table, ranch books spread out, calculating costs: feed, brooder expansion, fuel. Labor, the $35 per gosling barely covered expenses. Once she paid Owen Hayes. Once she paid for fuel to drive to 11 ranches. Once she factored in her own labor. 70 hours a week for 5 months. She'd make maybe $10,000 on a $60,000 gross. That wasn't profiteering, that was survival. Beck, if I gave the geese away free, they'd say I was a charity case. If I charge what it costs, I'm profiteering. If I don't share at all, I'm selfish. I can't win with people like Donna, so I'm going to do what Grandma Margaret did. Keep my head down. Do the work. Let results speak. Rebecca nodded, went back to her textbook. But Linda sat there thinking about Donna Patterson, about George Patterson, about 12 years of silence from a man who'd known she was right since April of 1977. But never said it, because saying it would cost him something. Pride maybe, or the certainty that his way was the only way, whatever it was. It had kept him silent for 12 years, and Linda wondered, how much longer? By the second week of January 1989, Sandhills ranchers had signed contracts. By the end of February 11, Linda contacted Murray McMurray Hatchery, placed an order that made the man on the phone go silent for 10 seconds. "Mrs. Morrison, you're ordering. Let me make sure I have this right. 3,700 Toulouse goslings and 140 Emden ganders." "That's correct, ma'am. We've never had an order that large from one operation. Are you starting a commercial hatchery?" "No. I'm supplying breeding stock to 11 ranches. They'll raise them. I'm just coordinating delivery, ma'am." That's a $56,000 order. I'm aware. We'll need to contract with our suppliers to get that many birds ready by May. Can you do it?" Pause. "Yes, ma'am. We can do it. But we'll need payment up front. Half now. Half on delivery. Send me the contract." Linda hung up, sat at the kitchen table. $28,000. Half the order due now. She had it. Barely. 12 years of saving. 12 years of down income. Egg income. Breeding stock income. 12 years of living cheap. Driving Kenneth's truck because buying her own wasn't essential. Wearing the same work clothes until they fell apart. Eating simply. Spending nothing that wasn't absolutely necessary, because Linda Morrison hadn't survived 12 years by spending money she didn't have. She wrote the check, mailed it, waited. April 3rd, 1989, 2 semi-trucks pulled into the Morrison ranch. 9 a.m. Linda was waiting. Rebecca was home spring break. 5 days. Kenneth Hayes was there. Owen Hayes, his son. Hired full-time in January. The drivers got out. Looked around. "Mrs. Morrison?" "That's me. We've got 3,700 Toulouse goslings and 140 Emden ganders." "Where do you want them?" Linda pointed to the expanded brooder shed. "There." Unloading took 2 days. 12 cardboard boxes at a time. Carried into the brooder, placed in the heat bay. Linda supervised every step, made sure temperatures held, made sure waterers functioned, made sure feed troughs were accessible, made sure no gosling got trampled or separated or chilled. By the evening of April 4th, 3,840 goslings were safely installed in the Morrison brooder shed. Cheaping eating, drinking, beginning the imprint process. Linda stood in the doorway, looking at them, thinking, this is what Margaret saw in 1932. This is what I saw in 1976. And this is what will save Cherry County. Whether they admit it or not. May 15th, 1989. The goslings had been distributed to 11 Sandhills ranches. Linda had visited each ranch, walked each pasture, identified predator approach corridors, marked them with red-painted survey stakes, identified holding water, marked it with white-painted survey stakes, wrote imprint protocols specific to each ranch's topography, smallest ranch. 18 goslings on 180 acres, largest ranch. 60 goslings on 2,200 acres. Each ranch received the same consultation document, 12 pages, hand-typed on Margaret's Olympia SM9 manual typewriter from 1964. Included imprint schedule, predator approach map, winter feeding plan, Goose to cattle stocking ratio table by pasture acreage. Margaret's down-plucking cycle adapted to Northern Plains climate. Final page. Linda does handwriting. Cursive blue ink. Do not change the imprint schedule. Do not skip the morning walk. Do not take a gander in trade for a calf. Do not name the geese. The geese will name themselves to you. Linda finished the last consultation visit. Patterson Ranch. Walked the pasture with Stephen. Explained the system. Answered questions. Got back in Kenneth's truck. Drove home. Exhausted, 51 years old, hands aching. Arthritis worse now. Some mornings she couldn't make a fist. But she'd done it. 11 ranches. 3,840 goslings. Delivered. Installed. Explained the 1989 calving season would open with the largest multi-species grazing conversion ever conducted in a single Sandhills county at one time. And everyone would be watching. May 1989. Donald Fisher drove to the Morrison ranch. Saturday afternoon. Linda was in the kitchen making coffee. Saw Donald's truck pull up. Walked outside. Met him at the gate. Donald Fisher. 65 years old now. 17 years as association president. Face weathered. Eyes tired. The look of a man who'd spent his whole life being certain about things and was just starting to realize certainty wasn't the same as correctness. He took off his hat, held it against his chest. Mrs. Morrison. I have 2 questions. First, would you consider presenting a series of educational lectures on multi-species grazing systems at the Cherry County Cattlemen's Association quarterly meetings, with a small honorarium for your time? Beginning fall 1989, Linda didn't answer right away. Just looked at him, Donald Fisher, who'd mocked her at the Valentin Cafe in August of 1976, who'd been telling everyone for 13 years that geese didn't belong on cattle ranches, who was now standing at her gate, hat in hand, asking her to teach. Second question. Donald's voice dropped, quieter, almost ashamed. Would you accept the apology of a man who's been wrong for 12 years? About the most important thing he ever held an opinion on. No one spoke. Wind in the grass, geese honking in the distance, a meadowlark somewhere. Linda thought about saying no. Thought about making him wait, the way she'd waited. 12 years. But then she thought about Margaret, who'd never gotten an apology, who died at 50 without hearing anyone admit she was right, and Linda decided she wouldn't make Donald Fisher wait, not because he deserved forgiveness, but because she deserved to be done carrying the weight of his wrongness. Yes to both questions. Donald nodded, put his hat back on, drove away. Linda watched him go, felt something release in her chest, something she'd been holding for 12 years, the need to be vindicated. She'd been vindicated. Now she could let it go. October 1989. George Patterson drove to the Morrison Ranch. Saturday afternoon. Alone, 66 years old. 33 geese on the Patterson Ranch now. Working geese. Ranged with the herd through the 1989 calving season. Patterson predator loss in 1989. 3 calves versus 38 in 1988. George parked at the gate, got out, walked to the fence overlooking Linda's south meadow. Stood there, watching the geese. 12 generations into Linda's selective breeding now. Walking loose flank formation around a small group of Hereford yearlings at the lake's edge. George took off his hat, held it against his chest. Linda walked out from the lakeside, 51 years old. Same gray wool work jacket she'd worn that morning in September 1976, when George had driven past and seen the geese for the first time. Hair more silver now, hands more gnarled, but still standing, still working, still right. She stopped at the gate. George spoke first, voice rough, like the words were being dragged over gravel. Linda, I owe my son's herd to you. I owe my own herd to you. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I needed to tell you something I should have said in 1977. That April. After Stephen tracked the coyote prints to your willow thicket, I drove here one night. 9 p.m. sat outside your gate, watched your geese walk flank with your cattle. I knew you were right then. April 1977. But I didn't say anything. Not to you, not to Donald, not even to Donna, because saying you were right meant admitting I'd been wrong. About you, about your mother. About 40 years of how I thought ranching worked, and I was too proud, too scared, too old to change, so I stayed silent. While you fought alone, while they laughed, while you almost sold. He paused, swallowed. I'm not asking forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm asking, can I come stand at this gate, one Saturday a season. And learn what I should have learned 13 years ago. Linda looked at him, 66 years old, broken, finally, and she understood something. George Patterson wasn't apologizing for being wrong about Geese. He was apologizing for being wrong about courage, for choosing comfort over truth, for letting a widow fight alone when he could have stood beside her. That mattered more than the Geese. Linda unlatched the gate. "Held it open, George. You're forgiven. You were forgiven the night you sat outside my gate in 1977. You didn't need to come today. I did need to. Then come walk the meadow." George walked through. They walked together for an hour. George read 3 pages in Margaret's leather book, handed it back, drove home at dusk. Next Saturday, George came back. Saturday after that, came back. By the end of October. 4 Saturday visits. By the end of November. 6. He didn't pay Linda for the visits. She didn't ask him to. The Saturday visits became, in the Patterson and Morrison families, a thing that was understood and not discussed. They continued until George Patterson died in 2003. A bench on the rise overlooking the South Lake was named for him. In his obituary, Cherry County Sentinel, November 22nd, 1988. Cherry County Sentinel ran a feature, front page, 8 column inches, continued 14 more inside headline. "The Geese That Saved the Sandhills." Article quoted Kenneth Hayes. "I worked beside Linda for 12 years. I knew the Geese were right by 1981. I should have spoken up then. I'm sorry I waited until the VFW meeting in August," quoted Donald Fisher. "I was wrong. I was wrong from the morning Linda Morrison put the Goslings in the brooder in 1976. Until the morning the Cattlemen's Association met in August 1988. I was wrong for 12 years. The Cherry County Cattlemen's Association is going to spend the next 20 years correcting what I said. We're going to do it well," quoted Stephen Patterson. "I owe my herd to my father's goddaughter. I'll spend the rest of my life learning from her," quoted Dr. Amanda Foster. "We've known about the Morrison operation since autumn 1984. Mrs. Morrison asked us to keep her name out of the literature. We did. We're no longer going to. The Morrison operation is the foundation of multi-species grazing research in the northern Great Plains. It is, as far as we've been able to measure, the cleanest multi-species grazing operation in the United States. It's been quietly funded for 12 years by a single Sandhills widow on a leather memorandum book. Her mother kept on the kitchen shelf since 1932. The article noted in its final paragraph that the Morrison operation had recorded 0 calf loss to predators in the 1988 drought against a Cherry County average of 11.4%. That 11 Cherry County ranches had ordered Morrison goslings for spring 1989. That Murray McMurray hatchery in Webster City, Iowa, had received an order for 3,700 Toulouse goslings to be delivered to the Morrison operation in April 1989. The article didn't note, because Linda Morrison hadn't told the reporter, that the breeding records on file at the Morrison Ranch had been maintained in the same leather memorandum book in which Margaret Morrison had recorded the original 1932 imprint schedule, that the brass clasp on the memorandum book had been buckled and rebuckled several thousand times since Margaret bought it from a hardware store in O'Neill, Nebraska in 1929, that the Geese That Saved Cherry County had been ordered with money Linda had earned in the summer of 1975, selling weaned heifers at the Bassett cattle auction. $560, 80 Toulouse goslings, 5 Emden ganders, a rancher's daughter. The geese nobody wanted, in the hands of the woman nobody understood, until they saw what a working flock could do in the worst calving year Cherry County could remember. Linda Morrison ranched the Morrison section for 21 more years after the drought, ran the gosling and consultation business from 1989 until 2010. 1998, Linda was 60 years old. The arthritis had progressed, hands barely functional some mornings. Same age Margaret was when she'd had to stop. Rebecca came home, 36 now, PhD in animal science, working for University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension, published researcher, respected scientist, everything Linda had hoped she'd become. Rebecca walked into the kitchen, found her mother trying to open a jar of coffee, couldn't grip it, hands shaking. Rebecca took the jar, opened it, set it down. "Mom, let me take over the operation. Linda looked at her daughter, saw herself at 36, young, strong, capable. Everything Linda wasn't anymore, Beck. It's yours. Always has been. I was just keeping it warm. 2000. Rebecca Morrison became the face of multi-species grazing in the northern Great Plains. Lectured across 8 states. Published papers with Dr. Foster. Credited her mother and grandmother in every presentation. My grandmother Margaret discovered this in 1932. My mother proved it in 1976. I'm just translating what they already knew. 2010. Linda officially retired from the Gosling business. 72 years old, hands could barely hold a pencil anymore. But she'd placed 11,000 working geese on 200 operations, 5 counties. The system Margaret started in 1932, that Linda proved in 1976, now running across the northern Sandhills. Undeniable. 2012. Linda Morrison died, 74 years old. Pneumonia complications from the arthritis, weakened immune system. Hospital in Valentine. Rebecca beside her. Funeral at Methodist Church. 200 people. Kenneth Hayes, 85 years old, gave the eulogy, voice shaking but steady. I worked for Linda Morrison 39 years. Watched her buy 85 Goslings when everyone said she was crazy. Watched her sit at that kitchen table the night she almost sold. Watched her prove every single one of us wrong, and watched her forgive every single one of us when we finally asked. She taught us that old ways aren't old because they're wrong. They're old because they worked. And she taught us that sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one telling the truth. The leather memorandum book was transferred to Rebecca Morrison, not to a museum, still a working document. Rebecca added her own notes, 2012 to present, in pencil, next to grandmother Margaret's 1932 entries, mother Linda's 1976 to 2010 editions, 3 generations, same book, knowledge, 2024, Rebecca Morrison, 62 years old, standing at the gate overlooking the South Lake, flock now 460 geese, 12 generations from Linda's 1976 breeding, still walking flank formation, Rebecca's daughter, Jessica Morrison, 28, animal science graduate student, standing beside her mom. They want me to present at the National Cattlemen's Convention about great-grandma Margaret's system. What should I say? Rebecca handed her the leather book. Say what's in here. But more importantly, say that knowledge doesn't need permission. It just needs patience. Your great-grandma Margaret knew that. Your grandma Linda proved that. Now it's your turn to teach it. Jessica took the book, opened the first page, Margaret Morrison's handwriting. 1929, if they laugh, let them. The land will prove who was listening. Jessica closed the book, held it against her chest, looked out across the South Meadow. 4 generations of Morrison women, 4 generations of knowing something the men didn't believe, until they had no choice. And Jessica crossed her mind about her great-grandmother who was dismissed, her grandmother who was mocked, her mother who was vindicated, and herself, standing here, holding the proof. That patience isn't weakness. It's the only strategy that works when you're the only one who knows you're right.